Hi, we're here with Cameron Bailey, the co-director of the Toronto Film Festival. We'd like to say welcome to him and thank him for his time to be here with us today. Tell us a little bit about Cameron Bailey. Tell us a little bit about the film festival. Tell us a little bit of how did he end up doing what he's doing? And maybe I should start with that question. You are co-director of the Toronto Film Festival.
That's right.
That is a big position.
Well, it's a big job. It's a lot of work, I can tell you that much. But I've been working in the film industry for 20 years. And, step by step, that's what this has led to.
Lovely. Was your interest always in movies from the time you were growing up? When did this come about?
You know, I wasn't one of those kids that was a real movie fanatic. At least I don't think I was. Now sometimes people who knew me when I was a little boy, they will tell me, yeah, you always used to like movies. But I don't remember that. I remember being a big reader. I was always in the library on the weekends. I read everything I could put my hands on. Even back when I was in Barbados and I was going to school there. And I only had one book that was sent over from England from my parents. But I must have read that book, 100, 200 times. And so I was always growing up a big reader. I ended up studying literature at university. And it was only in my undergrad years at university, I went to Western, that I discovered film. And I took one film course, and somehow everything that I'd gotten from reading books somehow translated to film, but then you had the visual element and the music and the sound as well, and it just felt like...
action.
Yeah, there was a lot there, like all of the kind of the meat of literature was there, plus you had this other stuff as well. And so I fell in love with movies then.
Okay. Now, can you remember the first movie you saw the first movie you saw? Now, that'll be aging, every time someone asks me about the first movie, it's like...
I know, it pinpoints you, right?
Yeah, it does,
You know
it does.
exactly when that was. And in fact, I was born in England, and I grew up there and in Barbados, and I was only 8 years old when I got to Canada, so I don't remember seeing any movies before the age of 8, definitely not. And we didn't have a television in the house, so I probably wouldn't have seen any movies. And when I got to Canada, it was still a while before we went to a theater. In fact, I don't even remember the very first film, but the first one that I remember going out of the house to see, not on a TV, was Jaws. And I remember that was at a drive-in when we still had drive-ins in the Toronto area. And, the whole family went, my mom and my sister and me, and that movie just terrified me.
Did you sleep that night?
Barely. I mean, as I was watching it, I was, just like, trying to shield my eyes because, that was the first time there was a movie like that was a big blockbuster that really shocked people and became a real event, and everybody had to go see it many different times and get scared over and over and over again. And I guess I got caught up in that, and so those big Hollywood movies were kind of fascinating to me growing up. And then when I got to university, I discovered a whole other kind of filmmaking, which you might call art house filmmaking, or more serious movies, really, movies from other parts of the world as well. I took a course that began with the French New Wave directors of the 1960s, people like Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut, and then it went everywhere but Hollywood. It went to other European movies, it went to Asian film, to Latin American movies coming out of Brazil, African film. That was the first time I saw films coming out of Africa. And so I discovered a whole new world of cinema that I really didn't know existed because I wasn't taught about it, and it wasn't certainly playing in the movie houses when I was growing up. And it was only through this university course that I began to learn about just the possibilities of filmmaking.
And now your job takes you all over the world.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's that part of the job I love, I have to tell you, because I do get to travel a lot, which is great. Usually I'm on the road for about 4 months of the year, traveling all over, trying to find movies, meeting with the filmmakers, and bringing it all back to Toronto.
Okay. Now you're a new father.
I am.
So
yes,
what's with
yes.
this traveling and daddy?
Yeah,
and
I know.
how old is your
child? It's
child?
not easy. My son Tate is 16 months old. He has been very patient with me, and my wife as well, I have to say. But, sometimes they're able to travel with me. Last year I was on a film festival jury in Amsterdam, and they came along with me. We spent the whole time together. That was good. But then there is a time of the year leading up to the film festival when I essentially have to go off and do my road trips, and sometimes I'm away for up to 3 weeks at a time. And that's not easy, And without Skype, I don't know what I would do, but we're on Skype all the time. So
nice.
that helps.
Tell me, did is fatherhood meeting up to your expectations? You know, I mean, like, honey, we're having a baby.
Yeah.
Okay. A baby arrives. Okay.
Well, I didn't run away, if that's what you're asking.
You're not the one that fainted at the foot of the bed,
no.
things like that.
I was there, man. I was there in the delivery room the whole time, full labor, all of that. So, I was in from the beginning. And, I'm not a young father, right? So it's not like I was unprepared for this, and it came at a time in my life when I was already a little bit more established. I knew what I wanted, and I knew I wanted to have a family, and I knew I was with the woman I wanted to have a family with, and so that part was easy.
Isn't that nice? Did you hear that, black men?
Well, and I know it's not always the case for everybody, but what you have to know, right? And you have to, in my experience anyhow, wait until you know.
That's
and don't
right.
just jump in there, if you're not sure.
Yeah.
So, that was a big part of it. And then I actually found that I took to it really easily, really naturally, because there's this little creature and all he knows and all he needs is you.
Yes.
And
there's love.
Yeah, that's all.
That's all.
That's all, right?
Yeah.
And at first you think you're going to break it and it's so fragile and somehow you're going to, do something wrong. But, it all works out.
It all works out.
Yeah.
Now, as a black man, okay, and you've got to make a call, all kinds of judgment calls about different films. You've got to be, you're traveling all over the world, and the respect level that you have gotten over the years. I'm sure you have seen, now that people get to know you, but just briefly, I mean, what is the experience like for you when you first started?
Well, you asked me as a black man, and so maybe I'll try to respond specifically from that point of view. Because, the job is the job, right? And it's been held by many other kinds of people in the past, but this is the first time that a black man has held this particular position at this festival, or any other major festival, I'll have to say. And that does change things in some way. I was told by a colleague in the film industry just maybe about a year and a half ago and he's based in France, in Paris, and he said, in France, we wouldn't let a black man have this job. And this is a guy he's a very liberal, kind of progressive guy, but he knows his own culture.
Yes.
And he knows that in his country, and anybody who's been to Paris knows there's lots of black people, hundreds of thousands of black people in Paris.
Parlez-vous français?
That's
all
right.
The way.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like New York or like any other big cosmopolitan city, but there is a glass ceiling there, and that's true for most of Europe, and even in a city like London, where there's a little bit more mobility possible. You still don't see black people rising to certain levels in certain professions or certain industries. So I'm aware of that, and I'm aware that when I'm seen in this role, I am also seen as a black man, and that I do have to kind of represent in a certain way, I try not to let that govern all of my decisions and how I behave, but I try to be aware of it all the time, every minute. And as I travel, crossing borders and handing my Canadian passport to the customs officials, I'm aware also that, the fact that I'm a black man affects how they react to me. I've had, a customs agent in India say, "Are you sure you're not Nigerian?" They just don't believe that a Canadian is a black man and has a Canadian passport. So, all these things are just part of the job, and I think there is some kind of process of education you have to do, and you have to develop a thick skin as well. I think one of the things I've learned to not do is to react instantly when you do face discrimination, racism, stupidity, ignorance. That kind of thing will crop up all the time, and it would be easy to just kind of get your back up and react and lash out. And when I was younger, maybe I did that a little more often, but I feel like I've tried to learn some lessons. Sometimes you have to try to educate people. Sometimes you just have to kind of just let it slide off your back.
Let it slide off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you have a bigger goal in mind.
Precisely.
And don't get bogged down in these little petty